Welcome to today's lesson. Thank you so much for joining me. This channel, Interactive English, it's all about trying to help you improve your English skills. And today, it's a quiz lesson, and we're going to be talking about business English, which is something that I have some other lessons, but I haven't done really a quiz lesson on business English just yet. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in this lesson. So I'm really excited about it. And just because we're talking about business English, I know people would think, well, it's a lot more formal. And there are some things we're going to talk about because it is it's an environment in which people would be more professional. However, that being said, I do have some phrases for you that are a little more casual, a little more informal, which you would also more likely hear in a type of work setting. So I want to say hello to some of you who are with me. Hello, Lolly. Good to see you as always. CT, Cindy, Mary, Chris Kenny, Harat. Thank you guys. I'll be able to give some more shout outs as we go through the lesson because this is a quiz lesson. I want you guys to interact. I want you to write your answers in the chat. Even if you're watching this later, write your answers in the comment. And even, again, if you're watching this later, please write to me in the comments. Tell me your name. Tell me where you're from. I just love hearing from you. And I always try to reply to as many comments as I possibly can. So again, this is an interactive quiz. I want you guys to participate. That is the best way to continue to practice and improve your skills. I also want to say I'm gonna try to do more live lessons for they're going to be more member only live lessons. Keep an eye out for that. I'll make some posts like Q&As. So that's something I want to try to do for the member community, which I'll come back to a little bit later on. Let's just go ahead and start. Here's the first question that I have for you related to business. So here's at work. Your boss asks you to go the extra mile. And the simple question is, well, what does this mean? So we're talking about the phrase to go the extra mile. What would they mean if you're in this situation at work and your boss says, I think we need you to just go the extra mile. All right. I'd really like you to go the extra mile. All right. And he's saying that he or she is telling you this, and what would you think? All right, what are they possibly talking about when they tell you to go the extra mile? All right, so the answer, all right, excellent. Just random English. Jane, perfect. I'll tell you what the meaning that I got from, well, my meaning plus like some of the English online dictionaries. Excellent, perfect, Abraham Lally. So they're talking about wasam, yeah. They're really referring, it's an idiom. So I told you this is a more probably informal phrase, but you would use it at work or a situation in which somebody needs to do more work than is required of them. So many of you said like to work harder, do extra work. That's perfect. If somebody's asking you to go the extra mile. So again, this is an idiom that you're more likely to hear or use when you're talking about work. Maybe you're telling somebody you're gonna go the extra mile, or maybe they ask you to go the extra mile. Exactly, excellent. Jose, Vicky, Gustav, perfect. The next question that I have for you is this one, and this is more. I don't know. I think many people are familiar with this quote that you see here, but I think it is fairly well known in the United States. It may be a little more common there. But if the situation is before ending the meeting, your manager reminds everyone the customer is always what? All right. What word? Or you could maybe a phrase, maybe it's a word or a phrase. I'm not going to tell you, but what word would complete this right here? The customer is excellent. The customer is always right. Perfect. Wasam, Angela, Lali, The customer's always God, Shadon, yes. I thought some people might joke around, say the customer's always wrong. Lady, no, the customer's always the king. So this is a motto or slogan that I'll just read this down here. It's basically saying that you should prioritize customer service, customer satisfaction. It's something that was popularized over 100 years ago by certain people, certain entrepreneurs that worked in retail. Selfridge, Wanamaker, Marshall Field. Those were actually the names of some pretty well-known department stores. I don't think you find as many today. I don't know if they're still operating. Nowadays, people think of like Macy's or J.C. Penney's. But this is kind of a slogan or motto. I enjoy asking about this because, again, people are familiar with it, but everybody has a different opinion of it. I have worked with customers before I started teaching in my other job, and I did not think that the customer was always right. They were wrong quite often, but that was just my experience. The next question right here is, again, another fill in the blank. Due to the economic crisis, many companies have been bankruptcy. And for this one, I'm kind of looking for a collocation. Collocations are words that are frequently used together, but if you're, again, talking about in the context of work, business, this happens, and well, I don't want to give it away, but what word would complete this? Due to the economic crisis, many companies have been bankruptcy. All right, what do you guys think? What word would best complete this sentence? And one of the keys there is bankruptcy. All right, bankruptcy is a noun, and it's a collocation with that. All right, Sairam, perfect. So let me put a finer point on this for you, because a lot of getting some different answers here. Abraham, excellent. What I was looking for is declaring bankruptcy, to declare bankruptcy. So there are some phrases that I think some of you were trying to connect with. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'll put a finer point on it. So to declare bankruptcy, this is a collocation. These words are used together. And bankruptcy is just a process in which maybe a person cannot pay off their debts, and they would declare bankruptcy. You could also say, like Gustav, you said, excellent, you can file for bankruptcy. That is another phrase that you can use. To declare bankruptcy, to file for bankruptcy. Some of you use the word going. In that case, if you're talking about the situation, because bankruptcy, it's a process. And you could say that the company is going through bankruptcy. So again, there are different ways that you can talk about this depending on the situation. In this question right here, I think that the most acceptable answers would be like declaring bankruptcy or filing for bankruptcy. But once you start like that process, then you could say, well, the company is going through bankruptcy. So I hope that makes it a little easier to understand. I put declare up there. It's a very common verb that you might hear people use when talking about bankruptcy. Rod just joined us. Hello, Rod. Good to see you. Lali asked, go to bankrupt. You could say that a business is going bankrupt. And in that case, going bankrupt would be that, well, they're losing money, and they're probably getting close to declaring bankruptcy or filing for bankruptcy, either one. So I hope that helps. But again, these are good phrases when talking about business, because this is something I know with the pandemic, the economic crisis has been happening all over the world. Let's look at the next question. And I think this one, I think you guys probably know this one, but sometimes I feel like when I say that, then that's when people maybe they don't know the answer. So just as an example, you arrive for your first day of work and you are told to go to HR. So what does HR stand for? If this is an acronym, and I think this would really apply to larger businesses or companies, and you might hear people talking about HR. And in this situation, I think it is applicable. Your first day of work, and they say, yep, first thing you need to go see HR, go to HR. Excellent. Jane, Hadi, Learn English UK, Shays, Christina. It is an acronym, human resources. All right. HR stands for human resources. And again, this would be like if a company has different departments, human resources would be one of those departments. They're in charge of finding, screening, recruiting, job training, administering employee benefits. They would do a lot of different things, which is why typically there would be a number of people who would work in human resources. And some of you, maybe that might be your job. If somebody says, what do you do for a living? You could maybe say, I work in human resources. And then they know, okay, these are some of your responsibilities. The next question, are you ready? Here we go. And this one, I'm curious to see what you all have to say. There's no right or wrong answer, I guess. I'm going to tell you when I would teach business English, I'm going to tell you the answer that I would tell somebody. And then I think if you look online, then you're also going to find the similar information of what you should do in this situation. If you're having a job interview, there are some common questions that people ask, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are some of your strengths? Can you give me an example of a time where you had a leadership position? And then another question somebody could ask is, what is one of your greatest weaknesses? All right. What do you think you should say in this situation? You're in an interview and somebody asks, well, what do you think is one of your greatest weaknesses? Or what is, one of your weaknesses? Maybe not a tough one. Or maybe not the greatest one. So I know that, wait, I think a lot of you are giving like the actual answer. That's fine. But I guess what I'm trying to think of, like, how should you answer this? Like, what would be the best way to answer this so that you don't look bad? Because if you're talking about a weakness, typically a weakness is something that it's not positive. It's not good. Like some of you had mentioned, like Shaya said, easily distracted. Chengli, overthinking. Shadan, eye contact. And Alaza, the lack of patience. Gustav said there's a right way in Germany. So yeah, I think that the consensus, and I'll say consensus, which means that many people would agree that what I would tell people is that you should be honest, you should be humble, which many of you, I think you were listing like actual weaknesses. But instead of just like telling a weakness and then leaving it at that, you want to try to end it in a positive way. So what I would always tell learners to do if we're practicing job interviews is, like I said, be honest, be humble, talk about a real weakness that you may have, but then talk about how you're changing and what you're doing to improve on it. So that way it's like you're being honest and talking about a real weakness, but then you're reassuring the employer that, look, I am trying to do things so that this is no longer a weakness, or that in the future it will not be a weakness. Here is the answer that I have, and this is not from me. So you can see that again, other people are giving similar information. And I highlight it like, put your weakness in a positive light. And they say things like, emphasize the positive, avoiding negative words, failure, inept. That's not something like, again, I've never really gone into that part. Again, this is from Robert Half Talent Group. Talk about how you've transformed your weakness into a strength. You could do that, but again, then that's not, to me, that's not possibly answering the actual question. But the last one down there is more like what I was trying to say, like show how you recognize where you need to improve, and then talk about how you're taking steps to get better and how to do better. So it is a tricky question if somebody's like, well, what is one of your greatest weaknesses? Give an honest answer, but then again, I would recommend then talk about, well, what are you doing to improve? How are you trying to make it so that this is no longer a weakness? Okay, I know that was a kind of a longer question, so this next one is much shorter. Which signature, if you're writing a letter or an email, at the end there is a closing, you could say signature or closing. Not sure why I use signature in this case. I'd probably say closing. Signature makes me think of you're writing your name. Either way, which closing do you think is the most formal? At the end of an email, you're going to use one of these right here, but you want to be professional. You would like to make it a little more formal. Maybe it's somebody that you don't really know very well. Which one do you think is probably the best one that would be formal in the context of business? Okay, so remember, it's interesting getting some different answers. Let's see. Okay, so the answer, and I'll tell you, again, to keep it more formal, when I say formal in this case, formal would apply to something professional, but somebody you either know or you don't know. So in that case, I think overwhelmingly it's very common to just use regards or best regards. Regards, best regards, you can't go wrong with it. It's formal, it's professional. If somebody, maybe you're writing to another person at a company and you don't really know them, this would be the professional closing. The other ones, I would say that, like, just to go back, this one that they say again, I took this off of I forgot to put the source down there. It says the ideal ending for conveying a business letter conveys thanks and respect without eccentricity or an overly familiar tone. Those are not my words. Comes from, I forget where. I meant to cite the source. Now, I want to go back because many of you were putting something else down. Best wishes, again, that's really not in business. That probably context is not going to apply. Best wishes makes me think like, somebody's getting ready to do something or some event and you're wishing them well. Again, regards, very standard throughout business. Take it easy. That's informal. Something you would probably more likely say in spoken English. I've never really seen that written as like a closing or a signature. Yours faithfully, to me, that makes me think that there is more of a personal relationship between these people. And in business, like I said, you may not always have a familiar or personal relationship with somebody. So yours faithfully is kind of like it's a little over the top. And when I say over the top, it's like kind of like too much of like, if somebody wrote that to me, I'd be like, wait a second, I don't really know this person. Like that's a little interesting that they chose that. So I would say, again, regards is very formal. You can use it whether you know somebody well or you don't know somebody at all, and just say regards. So I thought it was interesting. People were choosing different ones for that. The next one that I have for you is your boss asks why your team is falling behind schedule. You say, not everyone is pulling their weight. What does this mean? Again, here's a phrase. It is a little informal. Not everyone's pulling their weight. What is that talking about? While you guys think about that, I need to get the cable to charge this before the whole thing, my computer just dies. So let me know. What do you think this phrase is talking about right here? I'm back. Okay, so again, I mentioned that not all of these, when you think of business, most people tend to think of statements or phrases that are more formal, professional, but there are many of them that I think are casual in just spoken English, such as this one, all right? Your boss asks why the team is falling behind, and you say, well, not everyone is pulling their weight. What does it mean to when you say not everyone is pulling their weight? Okay, I'm curious. So, I'm trying to think. Not good job, Angela. All right, talking about not ever. Abdul Wahid. Okay, Shadan. Yeah. All right. So let me show you what what I have for you, and I think some of you're on the right track. So if you were to tell this, talk about your team, and you say this, to pull one's weight, it's an idiom, and it basically means that, well, to do one's fair share of work. And oftentimes, I think you might hear people use it in a couple of different ways. To say that, well, not everyone is pulling their weight, and you would use it with the negative to basically imply that, well, the people you're working with, they're not doing their fair share of work. As Gustav said, yes, some people are lazy. They're not pulling their weight. You would use it with a negative and say, well, they're not pulling their weight. Or you may hear people use it as like more of a command or a statement and tell somebody, look, you need to start pulling your weight. You need to start pulling your weight and start doing your fair share of work. So those are two different contexts in which you may hear somebody use this phrase. So again, it's related to business. We're talking about work, to pull someone's weight. Then let's continue on this same track, and we could say, well, because some people on the team are not pulling their weight, your boss says, well, you're going to need to pick up the slack. What does this mean? So it's kind of a two-part conversation. Your boss says, what's happening? You say, well, not everyone's pulling their weight. And then your boss says, okay, well, then you're going to need to pick up the slack. It's not something that you want to hear in this situation. But again, this is a phrase that you could use. It's talking about work. It's related to work. You're going to need to pick up the slack. So close, I think, again, remember, if you're not pulling your weight, it means you're not doing your fair share of work. And you're in this situation, you're saying that the other people on the team are lazy. They're not doing their fair share of work. So in that case, the boss says, you're going to need to pick up the slack. All right. I haven't seen, I think some of you are kind of close on the right track. But this, again, is another informal phrase. If you say that you need to pick up the slack, it's another idiom, like Angela, excellent. You said like work harder. It basically means that you need to improve the situation by doing the work, in this case, doing the work that somebody else has not done or has not completed. So in that case, when you pick up the slack, you're doing somebody else's work. They haven't done it. They have not finished. You're going to do extra work to make the situation better or to make it correct or right. So you're going to pick up the slack. All right. So again, it's a good phrase to use, I think, at work. I'm sure if you think of your job, think about whether or not this has happened to you, that you got extra work. You had to go the extra mile because somebody else was, they were not pulling their weight. And then you had to do the work and you had to pick up the slack. So if you can relate some of these phrases to your own experience and try to put it in that context, I think it's going to help you better remember the meaning as well as understand like how it's used. So to pull one's weight, not do your fair share of work. To pick up the slack is when you actually need to do somebody else's work. All right, so then I have this one right here. This is CYA. What does it mean? It is very informal. It's something that I think mostly is used in a business context. It's not something, it's obviously it's an acronym, but it's not an acronym that you're going to hear all the time. But what do you think it stands for? Those three letters right there. CYA. And again, it is, like I said, it's related to work. I want to see how maybe creative and imaginative you get some of these phrases or some of the. What do you think? All right. Any guesses for CYA? Marketing, call your assistant? No, it's not that. It's a lot more informal. Jane, copy your attachment? No. I told you it's very informal. It's not something you're probably going to hear or use, but again, you might come across it in a work context. So let me just go ahead and tell you, because if I don't see too many answers, maybe people don't even have many guesses. So CYA, yes, Abraham, excellent. All right, it stands for cover your ass. So in that case, what we're talking about in the business context is like there's a difficult situation. You're trying to protect yourself. And in that case, they're like, CYA, you need to cover your ass. You need to make sure that you are protected. So for example, maybe, again, think about the team. Not everybody is pulling their weight. And you have to pick up the slack. Perhaps your boss says, look, somebody's going to get fired because the team it's not successful. There's problems. So then you would say, okay, CYA, you need to cover your ass and make sure that it's not you that's getting fired because somebody else was not, you had to pick up the slack. Somebody else was not pulling their weight. So it's kind of like you need to make sure you're protected in some situation. It is specific, but like I said, it is usually like a work-related situation where you're trying to protect yourself. Because obviously, as you all know, at work, it's not like everybody is friends and everything's so joyous and amazing. There is politics involved with work. You need to protect yourself sometimes, and they may say, CYA, cover your ass. All right. So maybe that one is a new one for you. I hope that you guys, I hope you learn some new expressions from this. Is it rude to say that? No, I would say it's mostly said in more of an informative way. So if you're talking to somebody who's in that situation and you're trying to tell them like, yeah, you should protect yourself, like, CYA, just letting them know that, yeah, it's a difficult situation. You should protect yourself. You should cover your ass. So yeah, I don't think it's really like rude. Again, I think anything in business, whether it's rude or not, it would really depend on maybe who you're talking to as well. If it's somebody that you should try to be a little more formal with, a little more respectful. But again, it's an acronym that you may come across in business. So I hope you learned some new phrases. Again, I am going to try, as I mentioned in the beginning, try to do some more just member-only live streams. And I'm going to try to do a Q&A next week, which I'll put that up. Fixie said, my boss says, cover your assets. Yeah, that also works. I haven't heard it used as cover your assets, but again, it means the same thing. It also would apply with that CYA. Maybe your boss is trying to not be use that word. So they're talking about assets, but again, it's the same idea. Protect those assets, protect yourself. So if you, if you like what I do, if you want to support the channel, check out those links down below in the description. Become a member, become a patron. I am going to try and do some more member-only live streams every now and then, like Q&As, other little quizzes, just to interact and engage with that part of the community. So thank you guys. As always, I appreciate you being here. I really hope you learned something new. If you did learn something new, please hit that like button. It helps feed the algorithm gods and spread spread things. So please hit that like button down below. If you did not learn anything new, no, then you don't need to hit the like button. Don't worry about it, okay? So thank you guys for joining me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope you can go out and maybe use some of these phrases at work and try to apply them. Some of them, I said, they're very casual, but I think they're very useful when talking about work, like picking up the slack, going the extra mile, pulling one's weight. Very useful. So thank you, Lolly, Angela, Vicky, Gustav, Rod, Farat, Esther, Nekla, Mewe, Ayiti, Just Random English, Jane, Eduardo, Abraham, Manuel, Sharan. Just trying to get in some last minute shout outs as much as I can. So thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you, Mary, for hitting that like button. I appreciate it.